Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Katie Snow,
Dr. X Snow.
and we are so excited. We have a great topic today, fermentation. And we hope everyone has their paper and their pencils ready or their app on their phone that they're taking notes with, because there'll be some great notes to take home from this interview today. We do have a guest today, Nick Lebinsky. Nick is a nutrition consultant and a leading supplement industry expert in quality standards. Nick has joined us before to talk about his experiences in the supplement industry. And some important facts came out in the last interview that you don't want to miss out on. So if you haven't caught this interview, make sure that you go to our YouTube channel and check it out. The title of the interview is How Safe Are Your Supplements? So let's go ahead and get started. And Nick, before we dive into today's topic, tell us again a little bit about your background and how you became an industry expert.
Thank you, Dr. Katie, Dr. Eric Snow, for having me again this time. Many moons ago, about 11 years, I started in this. Actually, I came from UT and got my degree, my discipline in microbiology. So that was my passion. And I started this industry with a company that actually helped me refine my passion for microbiology by actually working on fermentation. Actually, I have a patent under my name as well. And, during this fermentation process, it's a very complex process that involves organisms, and you're producing metabolites that are beneficial for the human body. And, for the 11 years, I've basically worked on refining my technique to where I'm at today. And, I've learned, grew with the industry as the industry learned about different metabolites, postbiotics. 11 years ago, people weren't talking about that. It really became, when they realized the gut-brain connection, your second brain, there's more bacteria, they say, or at least the same amount as all your cells in your body, how important fermentation has been. And people have been fermenting for millennia, literally, from everything from beer and wine to, preserving food. And then they didn't realize they were producing beneficial compounds. They just know that it was good to eat. I could store it for a long time. It didn't spoil. Sometimes it made me feel good by having some alcohol. It was something different. But what they found out, those old, let's call it an old technology, is so beneficial for your health. And so I've been very privileged to be able to learn more about this and to grow and refine my technique over the years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's excellent. So first question we have, can you tell us a little bit more specific about the fermentation process as it applies to a supplement?
Understood. And let me back up a little bit and talk a little bit about the history. Like I said, it started, thousands of years ago, and they used this process to preserve food and to produce different substances. It wasn't until Louis Pasteur realized, okay, you can't have fermentation without some kind of organism, something, because it just doesn't work. He made two different flasks, basically, had nothing in one, made sure nothing, and then one with it, and realized it didn't produce anything. And it was refined over the years, literally for the last 100 years, understanding that fermentation is made by enzymes within the bacteria, and that you need coenzymes and all these other factors to make the substance. So technologies over the years, our companies have taken that and refined it. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Kind of this is where GMO comes from, making selective DNA changes, which can lead to bad things. You may have heard in the 80s with the genetically modified tryptophan causing eosinophilia myalgia. So you got to be very careful. It's an old technology, but with a new application, you got to make sure you work with a trusted company when you buy something. But supplement companies realized, okay, whenever the postbiotics came out, which just kind of lets you know what postbiotics are, they're compounds made by the bacteria or organism they use. And these compounds produce beneficial effects. It's like organic acid, butyrate, which has immune modulating effects, as well as energy for your epithelial cells in your gut. It's these compounds that really give you that health benefit. And it's produced, from the probiotic, from the prebiotic. So there's prebiotic, postbiotics, and prebiotic, probiotic, in Postbiotics. It's hard to say sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 times in a row. But these Postbiotics, these supplement companies, wow, this is something really good and healthy for you. And so these other companies were producing this to give you that other Postbiotics. Also, it helps release, different vitamins, minerals, can actually produce vitamins like B12. And then also at the same time, it can actually reduce certain anti-nutrients.
Mhm.
Right. Now, you have a picture, right, of a green supplement versus a fermented green supplement.
Yeah, this is from your green power, actually, and everybody wants to see what the actual product looks like before I go over. 1 second. Here you go. So it was interesting and actually pretty cool to see. This is a scanning electron microscopy of your fermented greens to non-fermented greens. You notice from the picture itself, it's, picture is worth 1,000 words. You can easily see that it's been broken down. So literally been pre-digested for you. And it releases a lot of the sugars. So if it has a high sugar content or just sugar in general, it'll reduce that. And also it will it'll increase the vitamin mineral content of there because of the release of those vitamins and the reduction of sugars. And you can see it's pretty intact with the non-fermented greens, the industry one we found. It also breaks down the cell wall to help with that absorption. So that way, once again, your gut only has so much time to digest it, and especially depending on what you eat, the combination of foods, depending on how much fiber, you may not get all the nutrients because of that. And this allows you to get optimal nutrition by fermenting first.
Right.
Yeah, that's so interesting because a lot of people, greens on the market is so popular and people just grab, okay, which one's the cheapest? And you don't realize you may be paying even a high price tag, but what you're getting your body may not be able to break down and utilize, or you're overpaying for a supplement you're not getting full consumption and, basically the breakdown and getting it into your system and utilizing it. So that's an important point that you pointed out.
Yeah, it's so important to understand why these are more expensive, because people look at it and say, this is a fermented beet, what is a regular beet? It's like half the price. Why do I buy a fermented product? And I can go buy sauerkraut and kimchi and it's so cheap. Well, those are, done usually wild type. What's usually done with any kind of fermented product in the supplement industry, using kind of lactobacillus species or some other probiotic species to produce a product that has a specific effect. And you have to control that species to make sure there's nothing else in there. So usually you have to do pre-fermentation a slew of tests to make sure there's nothing else in there. So if there's additional starch, if you look at my past interview with y'all, you know that the How Safe Are Your Supplements, there's a lot of extra things in there. And that extra starch and whatever other compounds that may be in there can actually produce other things in the fermentation, because every ingredient produces something. And so you got to be very careful with that. Also, are you testing for Bacillus cereus? Are you testing for Clostridia or other pathogens? Because what are you doing in fermentation? You're literally propagating the fermentation itself or the bacteria itself.
Right.
So if you have those, even if it's one, you may produce something that's toxic and can actually hurt somebody. Also, you got to understand the metabolics of that organism. So if you just use some random one or do wild type, you got to be very careful, because they can produce something that's normal for them in the environment, but very bad for your health.
Right.
And then post,
Right.
you got to make sure that you didn't produce these toxins, and is it in a form that's going to be able to be consumed. So it's so important to understand that the complex process to produce a product that, compared to, let's say, fermented beets and regular beets, it's so much better for you. Less sugar, with beets, higher nitrates, and even more betaine in that case.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And just going back to something you were just saying, I know at home we make fermented vegetables, mainly sauerkraut, and So one thing that I have to watch out for when I'm preparing it, you leave it on the counter for a few days, let the fermentation process start. And then once you put it in the refrigerator, the first time you take it out to consume it, you open and look, if there's little white specks, that's cam yeast. And a lot of people, when they first get started, oh, I'm gonna, ferment vegetables at home, they don't realize that, and they're actually consuming that, which actually doesn't taste good, but they don't realize, it's, part of the fermentation process. And so they're eating that, and they're actually taking in a pathogen they shouldn't. So very good point, you saying that. So second question we have, are there different types of supplement fermentation processes? And if so, is there a better method over another?
Like I mentioned before, so there's lactic acid fermentation, there is ethanol fermentation, there's acetic acid fermentation, and there's even enzyme fermentation. And some companies use enzyme fermentation just because it's a simpler method. You don't have to worry about an organism, and they do that. But what you don't get out of that, you get the product you're trying to produce, but you're not getting all the postbiotics, all those other enzymes, those vitamins that are produced by having a natural probiotic fermented product. It works to a degree, but it's going to give you a whole body health now. So that's one type that a lot of companies are using. Some companies may use different organisms that are non-lactic acid generating. Why I prefer lactic acid generating fermentations is because of the stability it brings to the product. They've been using that for millennia to preserve products, preserve vegetables, it's there to do that. So you have a very shelf stable product that even if you open a million times, it's not going to degrade. As long as you have the right container in place, you shouldn't have to worry about that degradation. So my preference and what I've worked with myself over the years is lactic acid fermentation, which to me is the superior form.
I see. So Nick, can you explain a little bit more about how important the container is when you're developing or putting a fermented product into that container? What are some things that you have to consider with that?
Yeah, in terms of the integrity of the product and the stability of the product, once again, lactic acid is going to help with that. But like I mentioned before, you're going to have enzymes in there, you're going to have vitamins, you're going to have other nutrients that are produced during the fermentation process that could be labile to light. And you got to be very careful that the actual bottle itself is not transmitting certain frequencies of light through there, including UV, because it can literally break it down over time. And that's something very important. You also got to make sure that they're using some kind of desiccant because at the end of the day, if there's moisture added back in there, that will degrade the product as well. You also notice that a lot of the fermentation products, if they're not doing that properly, it'll be one color one day, and then all of a sudden, halfway, you'll see a change in the color. Right. Also, you have hardening of the product just because of what it is. So it's very important that the integrity of the packaging components are done properly. And if you're using something that's, using some other things labeled to oxygen, they're using some kind of oxygen desiccant as well.
Yeah. So just to show everyone our green power product. So definitely the dark bottle is what we were talking about, how important it is to have it in a bottle that's protected. You're going through all this trouble to have a fermented product, and then you want to make sure it stays, safe from light and the other things he was just discussing. So next question, Nick, post-fermentation on a supplement, are there testing methods to ensure that the fermentation process was successful? And do all companies do this post-testing?
So if you look at the past interview, which I mentioned before, it's not just post-testing, it's pre-testing. You make sure you're doing some kind of orthogonal testing technique to make sure garbage in is garbage out, period, no matter what, if it's just straight product or if you're fermenting it, it just actually kind of makes it exponentially worse if you ferment it, especially if there's other toxins in there like aflatoxin, pesticides, and all that. Post, you need to be doing some of actually repeat tests of the original pathogens. Do you see that in there? Is there, Bacillus cereus? Is there Clostridium? because once again, that's an indicator that it grew or it was there and you didn't know. So once again, that would be something you would have to throw away because that could hurt somebody, literally put somebody in the hospital or cause death. So,
Wow.
and you got to be careful too that a lot of the companies out there, so there's 10,000 supposedly manufacturers in the industry. 20% are not doing anything. They're making a product and literally just selling it because anybody could start a dietary supplement company, and that's a problem. Because I've seen advertisements in 5 days, start a supplement company. You're not going to do it right. There's no way. It's impossible. The amount of expertise you need, and the manpower and the on-the-job training and background, you can't do that. Unfortunately, anybody can. So you have to make sure the integrity of who you're buying it from is very important. And then the other test you got to do maybe NMR testing, which actually I did on your beet powder, your red beet powder, which I can show real quick to kind of show them what we've done. That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
Let me show.
Oh, no, that's our red beet power.
Oh yeah. Let me show you the postbiotics that are actually produced by this. So here's some NMR data showing the amounts of different organic acids, different postbiotics, and the concentration of betaine. If you notice, the blue line is just organic beet powder, just regular organic beet powder. And then this is your fermented beet powder that you sell. You notice lactic acid is large because it's a lactic acid, bacteria that was used. And then you notice betaine was significantly increased. So the sugars, you notice sucrose, glucose reduced. I mean, even sucrose over half. And sometimes you see this is completely zero. And this is actually a really good indicator on testing other people's products. If you don't see a reduction in sugars, what that tells you is that the company probably just put it into fermentation for a few hours. Because if you put it in there in this few hours, it's fermented technically.
Yeah.
But did you do anything? Absolutely not. And they're going to sell you a cheap fermented product that's not, once again, doesn't do anything. But this is an indicator that it's been properly fermented, concentration of betaine. And you have these other succinic acid and acetic acid, which are great organic acids for the body. These are examples of the postbiotics, if you will. So this is important to make sure that you're doing the right fermentation. Fermentation is done long enough to produce those compounds that you really want to have at the end of the day for optimal health.
I see. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into fermentation, and it's neat to see when a product is fermented right, how the bioavailability is so much better. And you were even telling us that even different types of nutrients can actually be created or more bioavailable through the process. Now, what are some things that fermentation of a supplement, besides making things more bioavailable, what are some other things that fermentation benefits you, like when a supplement's fermented? Or like dangerous things that can be protected from fermentation?
Yeah, so in terms of, once again, fermentation was a preservation method for years. The acids I just showed you help literally protect the product from other organisms from growing, non-lactobacillus species. Also, there's bacteriocins. And what is a bacteriocin? Basically a compound that does competitive exclusion, which basically means it helps prevent other organisms from growing. It's a natural defense that probiotics do. Actually, not all probiotics, but if they're used in doing the fermentation properly, which I believe yours is, will help produce those compounds so these pathogens won't be produced. Also, they produce enzymes that attack other pathogens as well. So there's basically an array of different defenses that the probiotic produces to make sure during the fermentation, nothing else grows because it wants to eat everything, right? And the benefit is when you drive that, that you get that actually as part of your body for your own gut. So all of a sudden, the bad bacteria that might be there because you're eating a Western diet and you have more of those bacteroids, then they get outcompeted or they get diminished because you're eating a fermented product. Also, once again, B12, glutathione, these different compounds are produced by bacteria. B12 is a 30+ enzymatic process, very complex. And there is no plant really out there or animal that produces. When you eat animal meat, you're literally eating the bacteria that produces it. And you, as a person, you actually produce B12, but you can't actually absorb it because past the ileum, there's no absorption. And there's been some studies in the past where they did some processing. I'm not going to get into it because it's kind of gross. Into processing of stools to relieve anemia from B12 and B12 anemic individuals. So you do produce it, you just can't absorb it. So that's why you have to get it from usually, especially if you have a vegan diet, you got to get it from the supplements that you eat. So it's very important that you get something like that. But that can be produced during the fermentation itself. And beyond that, releasing, of course, the nutrients, like I said, and postbiotics. And I can't reiterate enough about the importance of postbiotics. They've realized that, gut health is linked to Parkinson's possibly, and many autism, to many other diseases. And we're on the tip, maybe the tip of the iceberg of really truly understanding the causal and temporal causations of what this does for you, your gut does for you. And we're kind of realizing it's, we co-evolved and we need to have that symbiotic relationship because they're there for us and we're there for them. And if we treat them right, you'll do well. And from health standpoint, and having these fermented items just helps supplement them, helps with, refortifying them, if you will, and building that immune system that you really need, especially in today's world.
Right. And I think it's so important too to have a good quality fermented supplements in your nutrition schedule, because what I see when we do food records on our patients that come in, they might eat some good things, or they might have some kimchi, or they might have some type of fermented vegetable, but they're just not consistent with it. And so when you add a fermented supplement into your nutrition schedule, you're more consistent. And so now we're not only getting the great nutritional profile from that, but we're feeding this, important microbiome that affects our brain, our immune system, and everything. So it's just an excellent choice to add a fermented product into your nutrition schedule.
Yeah, I agree. The next question we have, Nick, can you tell us a little bit about the fermentation process and how it can reduce anti-nutrients such as phytates and lectins?
So the fermentation process, of course, is a probiotic where they're actually consuming the different compounds within that product. So usually a lot of the sugar, but they're also breaking down other compounds to either make them more bioavailable. But the great thing is they also break down compounds into metabolites that are maybe less harmful for you. So what does that mean? So there's definitely a slew of different anti-nutrients that the plant kingdom makes as a defense mechanism, actually. Some of those people have heard of, phytates, which come from grains, from legumes. One of the reasons they say always make sure you cook your beans completely. But fermentation has shown to reduce phytates, which by over 90%. So, these phytates, which prevent the absorption of minerals, especially like iron, which can cause anemia. This fermentation process done beforehand on grains or whatnot can help reduce that. And then you're able to absorb those minerals that are naturally in that substance. The lectins, which is another one item that's found in many different vegetables, especially in like nightshades, stuff like that. These lectins have been shown in studies to be also reduced by 90%. Nightshades actually prevent the absorption of many different nutrients, complex nutrients, and fats and other carbohydrates. And once you reduce this with the actual fermentation process, it basically equalizes so the actual nutrients can be absorbed completely. You get that full bioavailability that you need that otherwise the plant kingdom is trying to prevent, believe it or not.
Right. Yeah, that's excellent. So kind of thinking like a consumer, or in our case, like a patient, and you're looking to buy a quality supplement, and you see, for example, like with our red beet power, you got red beet power that's fermented, a lot of bioavailable nutrition in it. But then we also have, other products that are, well-known products and good quality products. But red beet power is fermented, and theirs is not. And there might be a price difference there. So in the consumer mind, trying to make the decision, why would they want to even pay more, for a fermented product versus a non-fermented product?
So the fermented product itself, like your red beet power, let's talk about what's the benefits of that one. There's not really any sugar in there. I mean, very much reduced. I showed you an example of that. Not enough to even claim. It's below what the FDA asked for it to be there to be able to even claim it. So that's, for people that are trying to avoid sugar, I think that's a very important item. With that reduction of sugars, you're getting that high betaine content. So that betaine, if you look on the market, you're not going to find non-GMO betaine, because beets are it's a product that has a lot of GMOs in it. People use that because it's consumed so much from that plant, which we don't want GMOs. So with your product, which is great, you actually get an organic non-GMO betaine in there. Betaine is good for healthy aging, which I think it's, from what I calculated, was about 100 milligrams per serving, which is amazing. That helps with methylation. It's an amazing compound for everybody at every age, especially as you get older, just because you're not methylating as much. So that's a great thing. And also the nitrates. Because of the reductions of sugar, the nitrates go up and the protein goes up. Two great things. The higher the nitrates, the more nitric oxide you're going to produce. So that nitric oxide helps with cardiovascular fitness, gives you that pre-workout drink as that pump if you need, so you can have the nutrients flow to your muscles to help with exercise. The nitrates are very important to health from a cardiovascular standpoint. And then also the protein, of course, from a plant, it helps almost, I would say, 70–80% concentration. For nitrates, you can see doubling of that. I didn't mention that earlier. So those compounds are, in that process, is important for people that completely ferment the product. These other ones, even the other fermentation, you'll see other beets that are fermented that are probably a lot cheaper than yours, but they're probably not completely fermented. They probably used some other items, and the integrity of their manufacturing process, question it, ask them, what strain? Are you using a probiotic? Are you doing the testing I mentioned earlier? Are you using organic beets? So what are they really doing? And also, is there a bunch of other stuff in there? So is it all flavoring and fillers? Because that will bring down the price too. Yours is 100% beet.
Right.
And you're paying. That's what you're getting for. You're getting 100% beet. And also, you can feel it the first time you take it. Yeah. I got that sample from y'all, and take that, put some B12 in there, a little bit of honey. It will wake you up like a double shot of espresso. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Yeah, so it's a really good product. I highly recommend it. Honestly, I take it now. I take it every night. So it's a great product.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like about a product like Red Beet Power, because when you start looking at beets, because you could always go buy a juicer and juice your beets. But one of the problems I've always had with that over the years is when you look at beets, or say even like carrots, the sugar content in there is a very high glycemic sugar. Now, when you eat the whole carrot or the whole beet, you get quite a bit more fiber. But when we juice it, we lose all that fiber. And so people have been trying to get, the benefits of beets by drinking this juice, but it really does damage to their blood sugar and just contributes to metabolic syndrome and different sugar imbalances. And so you can get this fermented beet powder and the sugar is out of there. And so now we're talking about a keto-friendly product. We're talking about a product that actually helps support your metabolism, your circulation. And it's just neat what you can do with the fermentation process.
Yeah. And the beets are in a form that actually combines the bile acids to help with reducing uptake. And actually lower cholesterol because of that. There's a lot of benefits to taking the powder form, and you get all that plus the postbiotics, plus the betaine, plus the nitrates. I couldn't talk more about how wonderful that product is.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's awesome. Thank you. Well, that's great. Thanks again, Nick, for joining us today and all your wealth of information. It's been great, and hopefully we can do more interviews in the future with you. For those of you who are watching this video, you're interested in having, trying the fermented supplements, check out our supplements at drericsnow.com. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can see more videos. Here's to transforming your health naturally. I'm Dr. Katie Snow.
Dr. Eric Snow.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Nick.